Hey Automators, I'm Jeff, and today we're going to turn this living room into Disney's Haunted Mansion using Home Assistant.
Welcome, foolish mortals, to the Haunted Mansion.
Welcome to my first Home Assistant how-to video. Actually, this is going to be more of a walkthrough since I am not actually coding live, but hopefully it works anyway. If you haven't guessed from the topic of this video, we're Disney fans in this house. So after getting Home Assistant set up to automate the house, I decided I could use the platform to add a little Disney magic. Now, I literally didn't create the Haunted Mansion in my house, but I did take the pre-show audio and add some simple light effects, and I think it turned out pretty good. Let me show you what I have set up. I'm going to be using my GitHub repo to show all of the code, so if you want to follow along, on GitHub I am the Jeffrey Stone. The config for my Home Assistant is in home-assistant-configuration, and outside of that, the basic stats of my configuration are I am running Hasbian, it is running on a Raspberry Pi 3, and the current version of Home Assistant at the time of this video is 0.99.3. At least that's what I'm running, because as you're following along, you might be using a different flavor of Home Assistant, and some of the things I do might be slightly different from your version of Home Assistant, so just kind of keep that in mind. I don't remember where I got the audio of the ride, but I already had an MP3 version of the full ride. Like I said, we're Disney fans in this house. I simply cut out the pre-show and copied the file to my Raspberry Pi. Then all I had to do was set up a shell command to play it. All of my shell commands are in my configuration.yaml, and they're all the way at the bottom. Here you can see some of the commands that we're going to talk about later. This alarm off actually is just killing MPEG-123, which is used by some of my audio files, and this VLC off kills VLC. Here is my Haunted Mansion pre-show full, which uses the console version of VLC with the play and exit flag, along with the path to the file. Now this play and exit flag is important because without it, once this command got executed, VLC would play this file, and when it was done, VLC would remain running on the Raspberry Pi. I wanted to be able to know when the file was done playing so that I could have it also be a trigger to reset the lights. So I use this play and exit flag to make sure VLC exits when the file is over, and then I have a binary sensor, which I'll show how I set that up later, which monitors VLC and when it's running, and then lets me know when it has stopped. Now, the audio setup is pretty simple. I'm not going to go into a lot of detail. I need to cover my audio notifications in another video, but for the time being, just know my Raspberry Pi outputs out the audio jack to an audio receiver, which then connects over a wireless bridge to my speakers in the living room, which is where the show happens. So once I had the audio file on the Raspberry Pi and my command set up, I was ready to move on to automating the lights. So I set up a package. Originally this was all in the Disney package, and then I moved out the Haunted Mansion stuff to its own to make it a little bit easier to see. If you don't use packages, they're a good way to organize your code and your config for Home Assistant, because you can put input booleans, scripts, automations, binary sensors in there, have it all organized around a domain or an idea or a topic. The only downside is they do not reload when you run the reload of the scripts and the automations in the server control. You have to reboot the entire Home Assistant to get those to reload. That is the downside, so once you put them in here, you probably don't want to touch them as much as possible. That has not worked for me. But in theory, once they're in here, hopefully you don't change them much. So in my Haunted Mansion show, I have my input boolean for Haunted Mansion. That's simply my toggle switch for toggling on and off this show. I did that because over in my UI, under my Disney page, as you can see, we are huge Disney fans, like I said. I have these entity buttons, and so when you click one on, it toggles that input boolean on. When you click it again, it toggles it off. I don't think it's going to let me. There's a bug, and I was messing with this earlier. Yeah, so for whatever reason, I can now not do that in the UI. So I haven't quite tracked that one down yet, so I can't show you what that looks like, but it is essentially just an entity button with the toggle function. Then once that button turns on, it kicks off this automation, which starts the Haunted Mansion start script. That's a bad name, but it is what it is. And then we get into the script itself. So let me back up for a second. This trigger here, this turning on, you can do it through the UI like I showed. I also have it set up to do it through the Echo. So there's a routine set up on the Echo that is called Our Time Has Come. So you can ask the Echo, or you can trigger the Echo and then say Our Time Has Come, and it will flip this switch on and start the show. So that is typically how it gets initiated in the house. Very seldom do we use the UI, but the UI does exist there for that. Anyway, so once it's on, the script starts. So there's two conditions at the top of this. First one is to make sure that the audible notifications are on. That's important because we don't want this thing going off in the middle of the night. And the other one is just to check to see if we're home. If we're not home, it shouldn't go off. In theory, if we're not home, it shouldn't get triggered. But in most of my audible notifications, I have this set. Mainly because also if we have people over here, family staying here, and we're not here, then we don't want it going off and scaring the family. Then I have a command here to set the normal volume. This is just a shell command. You can see it in my configuration.yaml. Then here's that shell command we talked about for kicking off the show. Our time has come. And then immediately we turn the lights white. So typically the lights in the living room are soft white, and then as soon as this starts, it turns them to just white.
When hinges creak in doorless chambers.
And then we have a delay for 1 minute and 6 seconds, which basically allows the music to play, the kind of intro from the ghost host talking about what's going on.
Welcome, foolish mortals, to the Haunted Mansion. I am your host, your ghost host. Kindly step all the way in, please, and make room for everyone. There's no turning back now.
Then he starts talking about a gallery, or being in the gallery with paintings of some of their guests. The lights turn blue.
Our tour begins here in this gallery, where you see paintings of some of our guests as they appeared in their corruptible, mortal state.
15 seconds later, he starts talking about a sense of foreboding. The lights dim to 25%. This is just to kind of simulate, shadows stretching, because there is a section in there we're talking about the painting stretching. I haven't figured out how to accomplish that yet, but I kind of tried to simulate it with the dimming of lights.
Your cadaverous pallor betrays an aura of foreboding, almost as though you sense a disquieting metamorphosis.
37 seconds later, I flip on an LED strand that runs along the banister on the second story. Flips them on, flips them off, simulates lightning as close as I could get it at least. 2 seconds later, it runs this scene, which basically shuts all the lights out. So this is the point in the pre-show when all the lights would go out and there would be a scream and stuff would crash. The strand of lights flashes again in time, kind of with the thunder.
Of course, there's always my way.
then 10 seconds later, the lights come back on.
Oh, I didn't mean to frighten you prematurely. The real chills come later. Now, as they say, look alive.
And there we are. The rest of the show plays out before it shuts off. Okay, so now that the main show is over, there is some audio that plays, which is why this delay is in there. For 160 seconds, it basically allows the file to play all the way before the show shuts everything down. Because, like I said, there is a binary sensor. There's a couple of ways this show gets shut down. There's always the kill switch, where you can click this right here in the UI and it kills it. It is also watching for this switch to get turned off. That happens either through the UI, like I just said, or it happens through the binary sensor. So in binary sensors under motion, I have not put this in the right spot. It's just here for the time being. There is a command line sensor, VLC player. This command right here checks to see if the VLC is running. If it is, it returns one line, and that tells us that it's on. If it doesn't, it tells us it's off. It's scanning every 10 seconds to see that it's on. From there, flip back over here to the Disney package, and then I will show you there is this house lights up automation that is looking at that sensor to go from on to off, and then it executes kill this ride. So it's all the way down here at the bottom of the Disney file, kill this ride. As you can see here, it goes through a bunch of stuff. So it stops some speakers, or stops the speaker. This was back when I was testing the Chromecast function, which incidentally, I attempted to use this Chromecast to do this, and I could never get the timing to be consistent. So I'm back to using the command line. I may try the Chromecast again, especially now that Hasbeen is end of life, and I will probably be moving to Has.io. I need to figure out how I'm going to port this over. Chromecast seems the easiest, except I have not gotten it to consistently play so I can line up my timing for my lights. But anyway, so then it also executes this, which is basically killing, I think, MPEG 123, which some of the files are played using MPEG 123 on the command line. It also kills VLC. It starts to turn off scripts. So all those scripts, it turns off. There's probably a more elegant way of doing this, but for the time being, it basically just goes through every script I have and turns them off, and then runs this reset show inputs. And then here's reset show inputs, which basically just makes sure all the input booleans are off. So there is one other guy here, kill show, which actually gets executed, I think, when the scripts get turned off. So once kill this ride starts turning off scripts, will actually happen again. There's some redundancy in here I need to go through and clean up, but essentially there was some stuff in here so that once the file stopped on the Raspberry Pi, it would bring the house lights back up and it would turn off the input booleans so that the UI resets. Otherwise, this always stays on until you come in here and click it. And I wanted the lights to come back on, and I also needed just a simple kill switch. So emergency off. Some of these files for Disney are pretty long, and so once they started playing, if something happened and I needed them to turn off, I needed a quick way to do that. So that's why these kill scripts and automations are in here. And yeah, that about does it for this video. So hopefully you found something useful or inspiring in some way. If you are not following my house on Twitter, you should. It tweets throughout the day at Anchorage House 2 on Twitter. If you're not following me on GitHub, I am the Jeffrey Stone on GitHub. You can find my Home Assistant configuration and some Python scripts I've done to help with my Home Assistant. And yeah, I look forward to doing some more Home Assistant videos in the near future. Until then, go automate something.